Hey there, it's Kenzie from Details to Enjoy, and today I'm going to be making the kits from our July and August size A subscription box. I'm going to be working on both of the inserts at the same time, so I'm just setting aside those other pieces, and I'm starting off with my paint tray, some foam brushes, and my paint. This is Silky White by Behr. I'm just going to start off by putting a little bit of this onto my tray, and then using my foam brush to apply this to my insert. I always work in thin light coats, and I tap off most of the excess paint from my brush. This way I have more control over how much paint is getting added to the insert, and especially on an insert like this where there are holes cut into it, you want to make sure that you don't have too much paint that's going to seep into those holes. So I'm going to work with a fairly light hand on this insert. And this is going to take a couple of coats. The number of coats is always going to depend on the paint you're using and the color that you're using. And with white, it's always going to take the most coats. Once I have my first coat on the sun insert, I'm going to move over to the shiplap insert and paint my white stripes. I'm painting the second and the fourth stripe white, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm really careful and use that line as a guide of where to paint and use the chisel tip of my brush to get a nice straight line. You could always use some painter's tape if you want to be extra careful as well. Once I'm done with my stripes, I can move back to my sun insert and do a second coat. And as long as your paint is dry, you can start to work on the second coat. So I'm just switching back and forth from my sun to my stripes until I'm happy with the coverage of the paint. Once I'm done with the white and it is totally dry, I can move on to the red stripes. And for this, I'm using Allure by Behr. I'm just gonna follow those same steps, being careful with the chisel tip of my brush and going through and painting these stripes. With this red, I only needed one coat. Next, I'm going to be using a tack to remove any excess paint from the engraved lines. If you were super careful or you use tape, you may not need to do this step. And the final piece that I need to paint is my star, and for this I'm going to be using Dark Navy by Behr, and this I will need to do 2 coats. So once I have my first coat done, I will let that dry and then go in with my second coat. Once everything is dry, I can go in with my sanding sponges and give everything a quick sand. Sanding is a great way to give your pieces a nice smooth finish, and you can add a little bit of distressing. So for the sun insert, I'm just going to be smoothing everything out by keeping my sponge flat against the surface and sanding lightly. I give the insert a quick feel with my finger just to make sure that I didn't miss any spots. Then I'm going to use that same sanding sponge to sand the white stripes on my shiplap insert, being careful not to sand over the red, and then I'll just use the edge of the sanding block to remove any red if it did get on the white stripe. After I'm done sanding the white stripes, I'm going to switch sanding sponges and sand the red stripes. Then I'm switching sanding blocks again to sand the blue star, and after I do a light sand over the whole piece, I'm going to do some distressing on the edges by sanding at a 45-degree angle and removing some of the paint. Once everything has been sanded, there's quite a bit of extra dust, so I need to remove that with a clean, dry rag, and I'm making sure to use a new part of the rag for each color. Now it is time to wrap our circle in the embroidery floss. So I have my embroidery floss wrapped around a popsicle stick that I cut a little bit shorter just to keep everything from tangling. And I'm going to start by peeling off the protective layer from the peel and stick backing, and this is going to make the back of my circle sticky, which will hold all of the embroidery floss in place. Once I have the end of the floss pressed onto the back of my circle, I can start the process of wrapping the embroidery floss around. So I'm just going to feed the popsicle stick through the circle, and as you're wrapping, you want to make sure that you're not overlapping the floss, and instead you're making sure that each string is laying directly next to the string from before. And you're just going to repeat this process over and over. This part does take a little bit of time, but it's really easy, and you can just sit back and watch TV while you're wrapping your circle. You could also always paint your circle if you'd prefer that look. Once you reach the end, you're just going to use that same sticky backing to hold that final wrap in place. Then you can cut off any of the excess string with a pair of scissors. And make sure that tail is nice and stuck to the sticky backing. Now we can use the rest of our floss to stitch the sun insert. So I'm going to start off by tying a knot in one end of the floss, and I'm going to thread the other end through an embroidery needle. Then, starting from the back of the insert, I'm going to thread my needle into the top hole and pull my string all the way through until the knot catches. Then from the front of the insert, I'm going to thread my needle into the hole just below that, creating a line. Then again, I'm going to start from the back of the insert, go to the next hole, pull my string through, and then create each line by repeating that process from back to front, front to back. And then this will create each of the sun rays. The order doesn't matter too much, so just go in whatever order makes most sense to you. As you're working, make sure you pull the string all the way through and remove any slack. This is going to make your sun rays nice and straight. Once you're done stitching, you're going to cut off the excess string, and then I just held this string in place with a little bit of painter's tape. Once this is secure, my insert is ready for assembly. I'm going to start off by assembling the shiplap star, so I'm going to peel off that same protective backing that I did on the circle earlier. I'm going to use this to adhere the star to my insert. If I start by placing it very lightly, I can still move the star around a little bit, making sure that it is straight and that it is centered in the insert before pressing it down into place. Since we covered up the sticky backing on our sun piece, we're going to need to use hot glue to attach this. I'm using a detailed hot glue gun. You can also just use a regular hot glue gun. You just want to make sure that you're working fast enough where your glue isn't drying before you've had a chance to adhere it to your insert. Once I have the glue on my circle, I'm going to place that in the center of my insert. And there are both kits finished and in our pocket frame. I hope you guys enjoyed creating with me today, and if you make your own versions of these kits, we would love to see them. So be sure to post your pictures on social media and tag us. We're Details to Enjoy on Facebook and Instagram.